Hello and welcome to our Capital Campaigns book by Andrea Kihlstedt for ADS 426. This is John Corkle and I am going to discuss chapters 1 through 4 in this brief video to give an overview of the material. So capital campaigns are more than raising money. There are several benefits, several stages, and 2 phases to a capital campaign. Benefits are that you can raise a great deal of money in a short amount of time, but these campaigns require a great deal of legwork, a great deal of work behind the scenes. One does not just embark on a capital campaign, one has to lay the groundwork. One of the things that I note is that most folks that have the deep pockets are going to expect that you have 5 years lagging and 5 years leading budgets, so that there is a multi-year plan and that you have a vision for your plan. Other benefits, besides laying groundwork that you may not have laid in the past, you'll rejuvenate your people and you'll renew the vision for your organization. It is an absolute base requirement that you have a mission statement set up for your organization in advance. Your volunteer program will deepen because they will better understand the mission of your organization, and you will have more strategic planning in place when you do this. Your people will be trained to do fundraising on a variety of levels. Most people are afraid to ask for money from people within your organization. This will alleviate this fear. It will also help you identify those people in your organization who are most comfortable raising money, particularly large amounts of money. Your donors will better understand what your organization does, and your donors will be more comfortable with your organization because you will have a tighter and more long-term budget in place. And our larger donors are very, 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 how do I want to put it? It's very important to them that one has a long-term budget. Your public image will increase because you have to raise public visibility in order to raise large amounts of money. We're talking monies in excess of $1 million that are planned for future growth, future programming, future hiring, future increases in programming, building projects, things like that. Healthier year-round fundraising. The level of engagement that's required to successfully complete a capital campaign will result in year-round fundraising as much healthier. One will not be uncomfortable making asks for projects. One of the projects that I mentioned, very, very small one, but we had a need for a mower at a nonprofit organization. This was going to be an $800 item, and this money was not in the budget. We didn't ask. Within 24 hours we had a check and we had the mower. So this fear of asking for money starts to go away as capital campaigns get off the ground. Also, capital campaigns having this long-term budget will give a much better picture, not only to folks who are your donors, but to folks who are leading the organization as to what the financial needs are currently and long-term. This forces long-term thinking. Short-term thinking goes out the window. So, what are the stages to the campaign? Well, first off, please understand that most people attempt to go to folks and raise money and have a failed capital campaign before they have a successful one. We do not go public with what we call the quiet phase of the campaign until we've met certain goals. Stage 1 is pre-campaign preparation, which I've talked about a little bit. Have your 5-year leading and 5-year lagging budget in place before you even start to talk to your donors, because they're going to want to see this. Along with this, your board has to be totally bought into the idea of doing this. How did I do it? When I kicked off a very long-term campaign, what I did was I used building the 5-year budget as the way to get people on board. And it's an appropriate way to do it. We weren't trying to fool people into, here we're going to start a capital campaign eventually, but we were trying to get them on board with what are the needs for your portion of the organization over the next 5 years. How much do you think your expenses will increase? What do you see as projects that need to be done within 5 years? What do we need to replace? What do we need to upgrade? A lot of conversations that would not have been engaged were engaged because we did this 5-year budget properly by going to many, many, many groups within the organization. Some of these folks had not been heard from on a budgetary level in the past, and they will be heard from on a permanent basis. When you lay this groundwork, understand that you are opening yourself up for a lot of feedback. Some of it will be negative, but this is how you bring everyone on board. So you're going to map out your goals and objectives for the campaign. You are going to look at a preliminary case for why people should support your campaign. You're going to identify your lead gift prospects. This is absolutely essential, and get your leadership on board and excited for the campaign. Stage 2, also part of the quiet phase. Your capital plan comes next. The campaign plan, your capital plan, is a blueprint that details how you're going to work it, when you're going to roll out each stage, who will be part of the core team, who you're going to hire to run the campaign, and an outside consultant is absolutely recommended. You'll strengthen and deepen your bench because you will find people who are very interested in doing this campaign and will work with you. What's interesting is you will turn people who, within project management, these are folks that we call undermining stakeholders. These are folks who are attempting to stop projects and undermine them. You will turn them into leading stakeholders, stakeholders who will take charge and work with you and help you to raise the money. This has been one of the most interesting parts of the campaign that I've seen so far, is the alteration in attitudes amongst folks who are stakeholders. And there are 5 groups of stakeholders. Leading stakeholders, these are folks who are on your board. These are the folks who believe in your organization. And you have the undermining stakeholders who are attempting to shut things down. And then you have stakeholders who are supporters. You have stakeholders who are non-supporters, but they don't plan to go out and undermine your organization. And then you have the large group in the middle. Your largest group are folks who are ambivalent stakeholders. So the attempt is to move each of these up the stakeholder ladder a notch. Again, what I said I found of interest is how sudden conversions would occur from undermining to leading stakeholders. Quite often undermining folks see that there's no plan, that you've never had a plan, and that's why they're upset and that's why they're concerned. There's usually a reason why they're undermining. This allows them to get that out and get this discussed properly, and can transform their relationship to the organization. They're related to the organization for some reason, and it's not because they want to destroy it. There is some reason that they're related to it, so this helps you find out what that is. Stage 3, still quiet stage. Lead gift solicitation. Once you have the plan in place, which you've built through several boards in your organization, and you've talked over with several lead people in your organization, once that's in place, you can start raising money, but you are doing this by talking to approximately 20 or 30 people. You are not talking to everyone in the organization, you're talking to a very few people. I like to think of this as the magnet that brings in the rest of the money. Somewhere between 50 up to 70% of the money needs to be raised during this phase, during this stage. During the quiet phase, you'll raise up to 70% of the money. At least 50% should be raised before you go public. These large gifts become the magnet that draws in the smaller gifts. So moving to page 6 of our packet. Advanced gift solicitation, this is when you start to go public. This is when you start to get your smaller gifts. And by smaller gifts, I'm not talking about $100, $200. I'm talking about $5,000, $10,000, $1,000. These are within $1 million campaign, part of your smaller gifts. You will get gifts as low as $5 or $10. All of this adds up to your $1 million. But you start with your larger donors. Once you've got about half the money in, to 70%, it's time to go public. And you can state, this is how much we have raised. The money starts to naturally flow in at this point. Stage 5, general solicitation. This is when you are literally going door to door. You are literally flyering and leafleting and sending emails out to everybody that's involved. And this is where you get your smaller gifts. This is where you're going to get $100, $200, $5, $700, things like that. Stage 6 is when you've met your goal. And this should take approximately 2 to 7 years. This is approximately a 2 to 7 year process from when you started to plan your campaign to the end. If you're lucky, it'll be 2 years. Quite often, it's up to 7 years. But have a big celebration. We've met our goal. United Way always uses a thermometer, and then they have a big party. The thermometer has met its goal. We've got red all the way to the top. We've raised our goal money. We've raised our $1 million. So the ingredients that are necessary for this, well, Exhibit 2, test for campaign readiness. These are things that you do in the first stage. Do you have a clear mission statement? A lot of organizations do not. Do you have agreed upon statement of campaign objectives? Is your constituency well informed, your leaders? Do they know what you're going to do? And do you have this plan so well formed that when you go public, that people are going to understand exactly what you're doing and why you are doing it? Can you give an elevator speech about this? Can, within 10 to 30 seconds, explain this is why we're doing this, this is how it's going to impact the community, this is how it will impact the organization. Folks who have written grants, this is very much your letter of intent. This is very much your cover letter. This is also very much your summary letter. Do you know why you're doing this? We understand our organization's niche within the larger nonprofit ecosystem. What are other organizations doing within your community to raise money currently? Do other campaigns exist that may take money away from your campaign? You may have to hold off on your campaign. You may have to accelerate your campaign in order to fit within the ecosystem of fundraising that's going on in the community. First is better than last. First is better than last. Your organization should have a strong history of major gift support. It should have a strong history of minor gift support, such as we can raise $800 for a mower within a day. Those types of things are very important. You have major and minor support that is ready to go. They are ready to write the checks. They will not be ready to write the checks unless they trust your leadership. If your leadership is not trustworthy, if you have problematic leadership, the capital campaign will not succeed. Do you have competent staff? Are the staff on board? Are they willing to help raise this money? When people call the organization, does the person at the front desk know the mission statement? If they call the front desk, does the person know exactly who to contact for delivery of a check? Do you have in place a way to receive large gifts that are put into wills? When somebody dies and they give you a large amount of money, you already have that in place. And it is important that you have a separate 501c3 that receives the funds. It shouldn't be the organization itself. There should be a separate foundation. There should be a separate board. In most states, this costs about $2,000 to set up. It's not an expensive proposition. You will get more money, and the money will be better managed if you have a separate board that is managing the money, that basically will put up a stop sign and say, no, we're not dispersing extra funds this year because the interest rate on our fund or the investment on our fund does not support, the return on investment does not support that type of draw on our fund. It should be a separate board that is saying, no. This is the reason a lot of people have an accountant. The accountant says, no, you can't afford a new car this year. You're going to have to wait until next year. It makes everything cleaner and safer. Okay, moving on. An organization that's ready. If the readiness test tells you that the organization is ready, time to move ahead. Again, have you written compelling needs? Have you written a credible plan? And just one rough rule of thumb, and we'll talk about this later in the book. One rough rule of thumb. You should not be attempting over this 2 to 8 year period to raise more than 10 times your general donations from folks in a year. And I don't mean sales, and I don't mean items and services you provide to the community that you get money for. I'm talking about people who write a check with no expectation of receiving anything back from the organization other than a thank you card. So those monies multiplied by 10, is this your goal or is it a little bit less than your goal? You're good. You're fine. It should be within a range of about 5%, give or take. A little bit higher, a little bit lower. If it's much more or much less than 10 times what you're raising, you need to reevaluate your plan. It should be very close to 10 times what you raise in a year from folks who just say, here's a check, do with it as you please. Thank you very much. Your case for support should be inspiring. You should have stories to tell. Lacking stories about what your organization has and can do, your plan is not going to be as implementable as if you did have the stories. So on one hand, we've got our budget and we've got our community impact statement that's financial. On the other hand, we have people who say, this is how this organization has transformed my life. This is how you raise the money. The third piece, you have leadership that's trustworthy. With these pieces in place, you will be able to raise the money with the plan. And the plan is all in the book. So your achievable yet challenging goal, I just described what that is. You should have some previous fundraising success. You should be able to rapidly raise monies for things like, we've got a problem with the roof. We've got a need for an audio-visual system. We've got a need for a new projector. We've got a need for a new computer. Small amounts of money for pressing items should be easy to raise. If they're not, there's probably an issue that you have not uncovered. The way to uncover these issues is to actually go out and do a survey of your donors, a survey of your stakeholders. I use SurveyMonkey for this, and people are quite honest and quite blunt when the survey is properly written. Sufficient number of qualified prospects at each given level, particularly at the top. And again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but you should be able to identify 2 to 3 prospects that can write a check right now for 15% of your total goal. You should be able to identify 2 to 3 prospects that immediately can write a check for 15% of your goal. And this means separately, each one of these people could write the check. So a $3 million capital campaign, you can identify 3 people that can write a check for $450,000. Does not mean that they will. You're hoping for one of them to say yes. But you've got to be able to identify that many. If you cannot, you are attempting to raise too much money. Make sure you have good staff support, and the way to onboard them is to bring them in with a 5-year budget plan. The leading budget. Full and early commitment by the board. Without commitment by the board, if you have undermining stakeholders who are sitting on the board, and they do not belong on your boards, by the way, folks who do not donate money to your organization do not belong on your boards. People who undermine the organization do not belong on your boards. It is not a way to control or to fix them. If they're undermining your organization, they should not be elected to the boards. They can be seated on committees, and when they become stakeholders who are leading stakeholders, then you put them into leading positions. Effective volunteer leadership. Volunteer leadership must be completely 100% effective. They need to be trained, they need to be on board, they need to be treated properly and thanked properly. Make sure you have a clear organization for your campaign so people aren't wondering who's doing what. I highly encourage, along with your formal organizational chart that you have, that you also have a Gantt chart. If you do not understand what a Gantt chart is, I suggest you Google it. You should have a timeline, and the timeline should be in the form of a Gantt chart. The Gantt chart will save you a great deal of money. They can be created on a whiteboard if necessary. I recommend an Excel spreadsheet, but they do not require technology. G-A-N-T-T, Gantt chart. Top-down, inside-out solicitation. A volunteer is the single most effective way for you to raise money. A person with a positive story to tell is an effective way to raise money. Face-to-face solicitations are necessary, but people need to be trained to do these solicitations properly. I tell the story of a friend who was raising money in order to build an addition to a school. The goal for the campaign was $250,000, and he set up a meeting over dinner with a lead person in the organization that could write the big checks. So I sat down to lunch. Person asked, how much do you need? Looks like a great project. And he said, it'd be great if you could give us $40,000. Pulls out his checkbook, writes the check for $40,000, hands it to my friend. They have lunch. Then they leave. As they're walking out the door, my friend is asked, how much do you think I could have written a check for? And he said, $40,000. The response from the lead donor was, no, I would have written the check for the entire $250,000 had you asked me. Now, I know you can raise the rest of the money, but this will be a lesson you will not forget. He said, if I knew you couldn't raise the money, I would help you out by writing the larger check. Always ask for everything that you need. People are not offended by it, especially wealthy people. They're more offended by you are guessing that this is all they can afford. You're guessing this is their level of support. You are putting a cap on their level of support. That is not a good idea. Speak the language of the deep pockets. And if you don't understand the language, talk to some of them. How do you want to be asked? One of the rules is ask each of them for the entire amount. Here's what we're looking for. Whatever you can give towards this will be appreciated. But do not put an artificial cap on that is based on you have no idea how much money. It's just you're comfortable asking this person for X number of dollars. Ask the people who've written the big checks to ask their friends to write the big checks. Hey Joe, I just wrote a check for $400,000. You're part of this organization. I know you got more money than I do. What will you write a check for? Ask the large donors to ask their friends to write checks. You will get more money that way. So every employee you have, so we move on to page 12, must know your mission, must know why you are doing this, must be on board, must be excited about this. You're not trying to hit people up to secure a big gift. This is a process. This is a process of our organization will make the world a better place if you're on board with us. So do you have a culture of philanthropy? I'm not going to go through all of these on page 13. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. Does everyone feel welcome when they walk in the door? Are your donor plaques in place and taken care of from past fundraising campaigns? Does your front desk staff know what they need to know to accept a check on the spot from a donor? Do they know why you're doing this campaign? Are you writing thank you notes to donors? How many times in the course of the day does someone in your office say something negative about fundraising? So how do you fix that? How much non-meeting time do people catch up or spend catching up on the organization's programs? Is personal contact with donors seen as a way to build mutually beneficial relationships, or are you just hitting them up for money? We're talking about relationships. We're talking about stories. We're talking about how you change the world. Do your development officers know what your major donors are passionate about? Does your board view fundraising as an important part of their work, and have they donated towards the campaign, and do they donate on a regular basis? I don't care if it's $5 a year, are they donating? Your problem board members are people that refuse to give 1 penny. Everybody can give something, and it doesn't have to be anything large. Does your organization invite major donors to see the outcome of their contributions? If they can walk by it every day and there's a plaque on it, you've got this covered. If they cannot, if they're 1,000 miles away, you need to send them photos, you need to send them stories, you need to explain in more than words what their impact is. The executive director and your chair and your folks who are on your board, are they active and willing to play a part in this fundraising process? Our key volunteers and staff on board. Again, the onboarding process, as technical and boring as it sounds, the best onboarding process I've found is having them assist in creating a long-term budget. And you may fail this test. Well, then you've got to go back to the drawing board and fix the things within these questions that you don't do well. And they're fixable. They're fixable within a very short period of time. Get them fixed. Get them repaired. Get folks on board. Okay. End of chapter 1.